He thought sign or get out would end me. Instead, it lit the fuse that would blow up his entire plan. I signed without hesitation, set the keys on the table, and walked out of the house I had paid for in full. What Evan didn't know, what he never even thought to ask, was that the house wasn't just mine in spirit. It was owned by the CBW Holdings Trust, a legal entity I'd created 2 years before we met. Every mortgage payment had come from my separate business account. Not a single dollar was shared, not a single asset commingled. On paper, in the eyes of the law, he didn't own a brick of it. I left him grinning at a victory that didn't exist. By the next morning, his high-priced lawyer was already shouting at him about the mistake, warning him he had no idea what he'd just unleashed. At 7 a.m., I walked into my office and found Evan sitting in my chair, dressed like a man on trial, but pretending to be the judge. A new leather briefcase rested at his feet, my bank statements, mortgage papers, and deeds spread across my desk, as if he were preparing evidence for a jury. "I've done some calculations," he said, tapping a legal pad filled with messy numbers. "It's time we discuss who really owns what in this marriage." He had even shoved aside my awards to make room for his pad, claiming our filing cabinet as though the contracts inside, worth millions, weren't mine alone. The suit he wore was the one I bought for a job interview he never showed up to. His hair was slicked with my pomade, his posture stiff, like he'd been rehearsing this scene in front of a mirror. But the papers he laid out betrayed him. Mortgage statements with only my payments, property taxes in my name, the deed bought 2 years before we even met, funded by my grandmother, who had worked 3 jobs to save every penny. "Your attorney," I repeated, lifting the Kingsley contract he'd shoved aside. One deal from that stack had already made more money than Evan had earned in his entire life. The same Evan who called lawyers parasites just last month when I hired Dana Pierce to protect my empire. He tried to rewrite my life on a legal pad, but every word he scribbled only exposed the truth he couldn't hide. Evan shifted in my chair, my custom ergonomic chair, the one worth more than his monthly gym membership, like he owned the space. He waved away my silence with a new line, claiming this wasn't about him, it was about our interests. I set down the contract and picked up his pad. The handwriting looked like a child's cursive, loops, wobbles, uncertainty. At the top he had written marital assets and then listed everything I owned, as if he were inventorying his future. My grandmother's jewelry, the Vermont cabin my father left me, the paintings I bought to mark my first $1 million deal. He stood, trying to face me with borrowed confidence. He looked so sure, like a man delivering justice. But all I could see was the echo of a younger Blake, nervous at our first apartment's kitchen table, pitching business ideas with a notebook and hope. I used to believe in those dreams. I used to believe in him. "I've contributed," he insisted. "While you built your business, I maintained our home. I supported your career, maintained, supported." The words rattled around like loose coins. Contractors fixed the roof he never noticed. Landscapers cared for the yard he never touched. Cleaning crews came twice a week while he lunched with business partners whose businesses didn't exist. "Is that what you told your attorney?" I asked, spotting the Garrett and Associates card peeking from under the mortgage papers. "That you maintained our home while I worked?" He bristled, voice rising. "I put my career on hold for this marriage." "But what career? The consulting firm without clients, the app company without apps, the investment service without licenses." He built castles in air while I laid brick and mortar. I moved to the window, the roses blooming in the garden I designed and paid for, cuttings from my grandmother's yard. She left me enough to buy this house back when Evan was still in his brother's basement, gaming until dawn and talking about potential like it was currency. "This house is mine," I said quietly, watching Mr. Patterson walk his beagle past my driveway. "The deed is in my name. Every payment, every repair, every improvement, mine." Evan clung to the only words he thought could save him. "We're married." As if vows erased ledgers, as if those 2 words rewrote law. But the truth was sharp and simple. I had never once commingled what was mine. His mask finally cracked, and when it did, the desperation underneath was louder than his threats. Evan's face reddened as he grabbed a fistful of bank statements and shook them at me. "These prove joint transfers," he snapped. "You put money into our shared account every month. Groceries, utilities, even your personal spending. It's all there." He slammed the stack onto my desk, but the sound only underlined the weakness in his case. "I deserve something for these 4 years, he barked. "You can't just—" "Can't what?" I cut in, holding the deed up to the morning light. "Can't own what I bought with my inheritance? Can't keep what I've paid for month after month while you were at the gym, at lunches, at networking events that never produced a single thing?" He fumbled with his shiny briefcase, fingers clumsy on the combination lock he'd probably set yesterday. "This isn't over. Thomas Garrett is one of the best divorce attorneys in the state." I almost laughed. "Thomas Garrett advertises on bus benches," I said, remembering the garish yellow billboards plastered downtown. "He's been suspended twice for ethics violations." Evan's face drained of color. "How do you—" "I run a consulting firm," I said coolly, sliding my documents back into perfect order. "I do research. Something you might know if any of your ventures had made it past PowerPoint presentations." He clutched the briefcase to his chest like a shield, the morning light softening him into the man I'd once mistaken for a partner. For a fleeting second, I saw the dreamer from that conference years ago, the one who spoke of ambition instead of entitlement. But the illusion was gone as quickly as it surfaced. "Well, we'll see what happens when the papers are filed," he muttered, retreating toward the door. "You might be surprised what a good attorney can do." I sank into my chair, still warm from where he'd sat, and pulled up my email. 3 new client inquiries, a contract renewal, a message from Dana Pierce, flagged urgent. She'd been expecting this moment for months. "Evan," I called as he reached the doorway. He turned, hope flickering in his eyes. "The locks will be changed by the time you get home tonight." He left, believing he still had time. He didn't. Within 20 minutes, Emma appeared with the monthly financials, her hesitation a warning before she even spoke. She set the folder down, her voice tight. "Evan picked these up from accounting yesterday. Said he was helping with the review." I flipped through the pages, all routine until the 3rd sheet. Buried between office supplies and a lunch meeting was the line item that sealed it. "Garrett and Associates, $2,500 retainer, dated 3 weeks ago. The night he handed me roses, he was already paying someone to calculate how much he could steal. That $2,500 retainer lined up with the night. Evan surprised me with flowers and dinner at my favorite restaurant, claiming he just wanted to celebrate my latest contract win." Emma's voice stayed hesitant as I pressed her. "Did he say anything when he picked up those statements?" She shifted, uncomfortable. He said he wanted to understand the business better, wanted to be more involved in your success. Then her voice dropped even lower. He asked if I knew how corporate assets get divided in partnerships. Of course he did. Evan, who couldn't keep his checking account balanced, was suddenly curious about corporate asset division. Flipping through the folder, I found more charges on our joint account. A real estate assessor, a consultation with someone named Bradley Kingston. One quick search revealed the truth. A business valuator who specialized in carving up privately held companies. At 12:30 sharp, my phone rang. Evan's name lit the screen beside a photo from our wedding day. Both of us smiling, my cousin making faces just off camera. We looked happy, but only one of us had been rehearsing betrayal. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying the stiffness of a bad audition. "What time will you be home tonight?" "I'm planning something special for dinner Evan didn't cook." In 4 years, his greatest culinary triumph was not burning takeout. Yet here he was, rustling papers in the background, talking about our future and making changes that benefit us both. I lied, told him I'd be home by 7. After he hung up, I sat in my office and felt the weight of what was coming. The man who once needed step-by-step instructions to use a coffee maker was now orchestrating a coup. And before I could process that, my phone rang again. This time my mother's Florida number. She never called during work hours unless something was wrong. "Evelyn," she said, skipping any greeting. "Evan called this morning asking about your father's Vermont cabin. Wanted to know if the deed was in your name or still part of the estate." The cabin, 2 acres of pristine lake property, my father left me 5 years ago. Evan had been there once, complained about the lack of Wi-Fi, and swore never to return. Now he was circling it like prey. Mom's voice grew sharp. "He also asked about your grandmother's jewelry. Appraisals, documentation. Evelyn, that boy has skipped every family event that mattered. Your dad's funeral, your grandmother's 90th birthday. And now he's calling me about deeds and appraisals." The weight of his performance settled. Evan wasn't just planning a divorce, he was inventorying my life. By morning, he was my husband. By nightfall, he had turned into my opponent, armed with cheap takeout and my grandmother's china. Evan had never cared about my family, beyond asking if there were trust funds he should be aware of. So when my mother told me he'd been calling about deeds and appraisals, I warned her, "Don't tell him anything else. If he calls again, send him to me." She chuckled darkly. "My memory is fine. I remember exactly what I think. Of men who plan their attacks while pretending to love you." After she hung up, I called Rachel Pierce. She answered her personal line on the second ring, voice crisp as always. "Evelyn, I wondered when you'd call." "I've been expecting this since Evan worked the Harrington Gala last month. Chatting up divorce lawyers during cocktails. Word travels." Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she recited my life back to me. "The CBW Holdings Trust, established 2 years before your marriage. The house titled to that trust alone. Your company incorporated as a separate entity with you as sole proprietor. All premarital assets documented, nothing commingled." "So I'm safe?" I asked. "Better than safe. Legally speaking, you're bulletproof. Evan can hire every bus bench lawyer from here to Manhattan. It won't matter. The paperwork is airtight." "Then why does this feel like I'm losing?" I whispered. Rachel's tone softened. "Because you are. You're losing the illusion of who you thought you married. That's often harder than losing money." Her words landed hard, not because I hadn't known, but because I had. Somewhere deep down, I'd felt it unravel long before the receipts appeared. I just didn't want to admit that the life I'd built included a man who had never really been part of it. Then her voice sharpened again. Document everything, every call, every transaction, every meeting. Men like Evan always overplay. When they think they're winning, their ego becomes evidence. I thought of Evan that morning, my office chair, his new briefcase, the practiced lines. He wasn't planning a divorce, he was staging a takeover. He's planning something tonight, I said, a dinner about our future. Rachel didn't hesitate. Then give him the performance he expects. Let him believe you're unsuspecting. The more confident he feels, the bigger his mistakes will be. And Evelyn, record everything. Missouri is a one-party state. Your phone in your pocket is perfectly legal. I hung up steadier but heavier. That morning he'd been my disappointing husband. By afternoon he was my adversary. By night he would show me just how far his betrayal went. I arrived home at 7 o'clock sharp, phone recording in my jacket pocket. The house smelled off, soy sauce and something synthetic. Evan had ordered Chinese, but not from our place. This was from the highway joint we'd sworn off after finding a hair in the rice. He'd set the table with my grandmother's Wedgwood china, the same plates used only twice, on our first anniversary and the night I landed my biggest contract. Plates he once mocked as pretentious because they couldn't go in the dishwasher. Now they were props in his performance. Candles flickered, lights dimmed to a funereal glow. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward my chair while he stayed standing, a manila folder tucked under his arm. He'd changed into the navy suit I'd bought during last year's failed job search. His voice was measured, rehearsed. "We need to have an honest conversation about our marriage." He thought blocking the door would make me feel trapped. What he didn't know was that I'd broken tougher men in boardrooms before breakfast. Evan had positioned himself between me and the exit, no doubt on the advice of his bargain bin lawyer. Establish dominance, control the space. He cleared his throat and began a monologue so rehearsed it felt like bad dinner theater. "Evelyn, we've grown apart. Our paths have diverged since the vows. I've been soul-searching in therapy, working on myself." Therapy? Unless he counted YouTube gurus, Evan had never been within a mile of a therapist's office. His voice rolled into the cadence of a second-rate TED Talk. "Our marriage is unbalanced," he intoned. "You're consumed by your work. I've carried the emotional labor, the household management, sacrificed my dreams to support yours." I lifted my water glass, letting him continue. His gestures were too polished, his pauses too calculated, his hand placement staged like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. Finally, he slid a manila folder across the table, nudging aside a container of sweet and sour sauce, like it was part of his stage set. Inside was a parody of a legal document, downloaded from some template site, patched together with fantasy. He demanded the house, citing maintenance and improvement, alimony for career sacrifices. Even my company, Sterling Consulting, was listed as community property, with him labeled as an unofficial consultant. "You want half of Sterling Consulting," I said flatly. "I've been your sounding board," he insisted, emboldened. "I've attended networking events, supported your late nights, sacrificed my own ventures." The next page went further, my grandmother's jewelry, reclassified as marital gifts, my father's Vermont cabin, listed as joint recreational property. Even my car, purchased months before the wedding, was flagged as a shared asset. Evan loomed closer, standing over me now. This is what's fair, Evelyn. What we built together should be divided equally. I turned the pages in silence, my face unreadable, while inside I catalogued every outlandish claim, every legal impossibility, every proof that he had no idea the papers in my office were decoys, documents I'd left out deliberately, knowing his curiosity would always outrun his judgment. His patience snapped. "Well, are you going to sign?" I set the papers down and met his eyes. "You want the house?" "I deserve the house," he said hotly. "I made it a home while you treated it like a hotel. And your business, our business, built during our marriage. Community property, the cabin in Vermont, where we made memories as a couple." He thought my silence meant surrender. What it really meant was that I had just handed him enough rope to hang himself. Every lie rolled off Evan's tongue with more confidence than the last, as if repeating them could bend reality. He spoke of the Vermont cabin like it was ours, though he'd spent exactly one miserable night there, complaining about phantom pine allergies that somehow never flared at Christmas. He'd placed a cheap blue Bic pen beside the papers, stepping back like a general awaiting a flag of surrender. His phone was already out, thumb hovering, no doubt ready to text his brother or gym buddies about his win. "No," I said, setting the pen back down. Color rushed into his cheeks. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. I'm not signing." His composure cracked like paint on a cheap wall. "You have to. This is happening. I've made my decision." "Your decision," I echoed, rising to meet him eye to eye in my heels. "Your decision about my house, my business, my inheritance." His fists clenched. "Our house. Our business. 4 years of marriage makes everything ours." "That's not how property law works, Evan." He slammed his palm against the table, hard enough to rattle my grandmother's china. "Don't lecture me about law. My attorney says." "Your attorney who advertises on bus benches?" I cut in. His face deepened from red to purple. He leaned across the table, lowering his voice into what he must have thought was menace. "You're going to sign these papers, Evelyn. You can do it voluntarily, or we can do this the hard way." "The hard way," I repeated, smiling faintly. "And what does that mean exactly?" He straightened, puffed up, and pointed at the door. "Sign the papers or get out. This is my house now. I've established residency. I've contributed to its maintenance. Sign or pack your things and leave." Rachel's words echoed in my head. He had delivered the ultimatum exactly as his cut-rate lawyer had coached him, committing half a dozen legal errors in less than 30 seconds. All of it captured by the phone recording in my pocket. I picked up the pen again. Relief washed across his face, victory shining in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, I signed every page, each stroke of my name as precise as the contracts that built my company. When I finished, I placed the pen down, then set my house keys on top of the papers. My wedding ring followed, the platinum band I'd bought myself after Evan dismissed rings as outdated. Without a word, I gathered my purse and walked to the door. His voice wavered behind me, triumphant yet confused. "That's it? You're just leaving?" I paused at the threshold, glanced back once. He stood among cold takeout and stolen china, clutching papers he didn't understand, celebrating a victory that only existed in his imagination. I said nothing, because the truth would arrive soon enough, delivered not with words, but with law. While Evan was celebrating what he thought was a triumph, I was already sitting across from Rachel, watching the net tighten around him. Her conference room looked more like a battlefield command center than a law office. Coffee served in real cups, documents lined up in neat, tabbed rows, each section a weapon ready to be drawn. She didn't waste time. "He said it?" she asked, eyes flicking to me as her laptop glowed. "Word for word," I confirmed. "Sign or get out." He even pointed at the door. Rachel's smile was razor sharp. Perfect. On her screen, his Instagram page glared back at us. Posted less than an hour after I'd walked out. Evan, beer in hand, flanked by his gym crew, posing in my living room. The caption, "New chapter starts now. Sometimes you have to remove toxic people to find your peace. Hashtag fresh start, hashtag my house, my rules, hashtag leveling up." "He's literally broadcasting evidence," Rachel said flatly, screenshotting with the precision of a surgeon. She scrolled again. This time, my office, my handcrafted desk now buried beneath 3 glowing monitors. My awards stripped from the wall, replaced by Evan's plastic action figures. The caption, finally turning this workspace into something productive. No more corporate prison vibes. Every pixel, another nail in his own coffin. My phone buzzed. Jennifer Martinez, the neighbor 2 doors down. We weren't close, but we had that polite, suburban rhythm of waving at each other on morning jogs and signing for packages. Her text was blunt. "Blake's having quite the party. He's telling everyone you abandoned the marriage for your career." A second message followed instantly, this time with a video. Through her kitchen window, she'd caught him on my porch, puffed up and laughing with his brother and a cluster of gym buddies. His voice carried across the quiet street like a bad stage actor projecting to the balcony. I set my phone down on the marble counter of my hotel suite. The Marriott wasn't cheap, but it was deliberate. A clean base of operations where I could think clearly. No ghosts in the walls, no echoes of broken promises. Just silence and the realization that I'd spent 4 years trying to be enough for someone who never even wanted to meet me halfway. Maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that he betrayed me, but that I kept giving him chances to. Just space, silence, and the steady unraveling of Evan's performance. While he toasted his fresh start in my living room, I was cutting him out of the empire he thought he could steal. The Marriott suite had a separate living area with a desk, my new war room. My laptop was open, files spread out in order. When Marcus Chen's name flashed on my phone, I knew something had shifted. My CFO didn't call after hours unless it mattered. "The transition is complete," Marcus said without preamble. "All company accounts have been restructured. Blake Wilson's access was terminated at 8:47 p.m. His corporate card is deactivated. All automatic payments suspended pending reassignment." "How many?" I asked. 17, Marcus replied, voice steady. "BMW lease, gym membership, country club dues, wine storage, and something called executive presence coaching. $400 a month for the past year. Executive presence coaching. He'd told me it was career counseling to launch his consulting firm. Turns out I'd been paying a self-styled guru to tell him he was special, while he left me dirty dishes and empty promises. "Document everything," I said. "Already in progress," Marcus assured me. Also, he tried to use the card 20 minutes ago at Velocity Sports Bar, declined. Of course he had. He'd tried to charge his victory party to my company, just like he'd been funding his phantom lunches with potential partners for years. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, my younger sister, 3 years my junior, decades older when it came to reading people. She'd never liked Evan, though she'd bitten her tongue at family dinners. "Sarah," I said quietly, "he's trying to control the narrative." Before ... Before what? She cut in. Because the Blake who called me didn't sound like Blake. He sounded coached. He used words he doesn't even know. Emotional labor? Relationship equity? Since when does Blake speak like that? Since his attorney fed him the lines, I answered. Silence stretched before Sarah's voice returned, hard as steel. "He's after the house, isn't he? The one Grandma's money bought. 4 years of you paying for everything while he played entrepreneur. And now he thinks he can steal it." Her voice rose with memory. "Remember when Dad was in the hospital? Where was Blake? At that crucial networking retreat that turned out to be a golf weekend." "I remember," I said. 3 months of remembering. And tonight, 3 months of patience were about to pay off. While he shouted about family values, the same man had managed only 20 minutes at my father's bedside. Now he was raiding my wine cellar and posting about it online. Sarah's voice softened across the line. "Do you want me to grab anything from the house? Documents? Grandma's jewelry? In case he damages something or tries to claim it?" "Not yet," I said. "Let him think he's won." "Cassidy," she pressed, "I know you. You're planning something." "I'm not planning. I'm documenting. While Blake builds his fantasy, I'm keeping the receipts." After she hung up, I opened the banking app. There it was in real time, his failed empire. $127 at Velocity Sports Bar, declined. $84 at the liquor store, declined. $45 at a pizza joint, declined. Each rejection time-stamped, a digital trail of his collapsing celebration. A text from Emma appeared. Blake called the office, asking for access to the company portal. Claimed he needed partnership documents. Security flagged it. Partnership documents. Blake, who had never been a partner in anything except spending my money, was now fumbling toward legal ground he didn't understand. Every failed login attempt, every call, every message was evidence, logged by people who actually understood documentation. Rachel's text came seconds later. "He's documenting destruction of separate property assets. Keep recording everything." The silence of the hotel felt strange after years of his noise. Video games, fake business calls, motivational podcasts blaring, as if volume alone created success. Here, in this temporary refuge, I could think clearly for the first time in months. Another message flashed, this time from the BMW dealership. "Miss Blackwood, we're trying to reach Blake Wilson regarding his lease payment. The account on file has been declined. The first stumble. Tomorrow, hung over in my house, he would wake to the sound of reality knocking, gym access denied, country club privileges revoked, storage units locked. Each small failure would stack into an avalanche no Instagram filter could disguise." I closed my laptop, lay down in sheets free of his cologne, free of the weight of disappointment. Tomorrow would bring fresh evidence, new mistakes, more unraveling. But tonight, for the first time, I mourned the marriage I thought I had. Not the man, but the version of me who wanted to believe. And then, in the quiet, I let her go too. Morning delivered exactly that. At 5:47 a.m., an hour Emma never messaged unless something was serious, her text jolted me upright. "Can we meet before the office opens? There's something I should have told you months ago." We met at a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from my office, the kind of place where deals were whispered and no one looked up from their laptops. Emma sat waiting. shredding a napkin into tiny pieces, her composure gone. 3 months ago, during the Patterson Industries conference, she began, I saw Blake. At the Marriott downtown, you were giving your keynote. I'd stepped out to handle the Chicago contract emergency. She forced herself to meet my eyes. He was with someone. A woman, early 20s, blonde, extremely fit. The jazz music hummed while I processed her words. 3 months ago, he'd told me he had a stomach bug, too sick to attend. While I delivered my keynote to 300 industry leaders, my husband had been 6 blocks away, with her. The lies about jewelry, vacations, and cleanings unraveled with a single scroll through another woman's Instagram feed. Emma slid her phone across the table. Then last week, I saw this. The profile glowed. Jessica Reeves, fitness influencer, personal trainer, and accessorized entirely in my life. In one post, Jessica smiled in my diamond tennis bracelet, the same piece Blake swore had fallen off during golf. Another photo showed her flexing in my Cartier watch, an anniversary gift he claimed had been lost on vacation. And in a gym selfie, framed by hashtags like #blessed and #living life, she wore my grandmother's pearl necklace. Emma's voice was hushed. These are yours, aren't they? I've seen them at company events. The pearls were my grandmother's wedding gift from 1951. The watch, stolen from my dresser. The bracelet, supposedly at a jeweler. I had trusted my husband's explanations, signed the insurance claim without question. Now Jessica wore my history like costume jewelry. Rachel's call cut through the haze. My forensic accountant found something. Blake opened a separate account 4 months ago. Different branch, same home address, only his name. How much? I asked. $37,000, she said crisply. Cash deposits, structured to dodge reporting, classic concealment. The timing matches the disappearance of inventory. Your grandmother's silver tea set, your father's signed first editions, pieces from your storage unit. My father's Hemingway collection, 40 years of careful acquisition. Blake had told me he was reorganizing the unit for climate control. In reality, he'd been stripping it bare, liquidating memories while I paid for his car, his gym, his groceries. After the call, I didn't go to confront him. I went to Mrs. Chin's. At 73, she was sharper than most lawyers I knew. She had never liked Blake, calling him that loud man when his music spoiled her tea. I have something for you, she said, ushering me into her dining room where her laptop waited on polished mahogany. My grandson installed doorbell cameras after the package thefts. They catch everything. She hit play. The timestamp, 2 weeks ago, 2:47 p.m. Blake's BMW pulling into my driveway. Blake stepping out, walking around to open the passenger door. Jessica climbed out, laughing, his hand pressed lightly against her lower back as he guided her inside. The intimacy was casual, practiced, the kind of touch that belonged not to a mistake, but to a routine. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd been living across it for months. He thought he was building a new life with my money, my house, my heirlooms. What he never realized was that every step he took left a trail, and the trail was leading straight to his collapse. Mrs. Chin clicked to another file. There's more. The video showed Jessica, alone, unlocking my front door with my key. Strolling inside while I was 3 states away in Boston, meeting clients to keep the lights on. She stayed for 3 hours. Another clip. The 2 of them carrying boxes to his car, my belongings, stolen piece by piece, while I worked 14-hour days to pay for the roof over their heads. I should have told you sooner, Mrs. Chin said, guilt in her voice. But I wasn't sure it was my place to interfere in marital matters. Back at the hotel, Rachel pulled together everything on Thomas Garrett, Blake's so-called attorney. The picture was pathetic. 2 suspensions from the bar, one for mishandling client funds, another for frivolous lawsuits. Fake testimonials littered his website, which promised aggressive men's rights representation. He advertised on Facebook, on Craigslist, his success rate 12%. Rachel's disdain was surgical. Blake found him through a sponsored post, David versus Goliath victories supposedly. The irony is perfect. Marcus chimed in with another update. Blake's executive presence coaching had been canceled for non-payment. His wine storage unit was issuing default notices. The country club had suspended his membership. His glamorous lifestyle was collapsing, one declined transaction at a time. Meanwhile, Jessica was flaunting another prize. My grandmother's emerald ring, this time at the restaurant where Blake had proposed to me. The caption beneath her smug smile, when you know, #new beginnings, #upgrade, #worth it, my life, my success, my family's legacy, reduced to hashtags. The investigation revealed more than adultery or theft. It exposed Blake's blueprint. He had never been a husband, he'd been an opportunist, biding his time until he could stage a profitable exit. Rachel and I met in her office at 8 a.m., the morning sun striking the stacks of documents that reduced 4 years of my marriage to asset lists and legal clauses. At 8:47 sharp, my phone buzzed. Notifications from the BMW dealership. His car had been repossessed from my driveway. A tow truck driver left a notice on the front door, advising Mr. Wilson to contact financial services immediately. By the time Blake dragged himself out of bed, closer to noon as usual, he would expect to see his precious BMW gleaming in the garage. Instead, Jennifer Martinez's photo showed him standing in the driveway in his pajamas, repossession notice in hand, staring at the empty space like he couldn't read the words. From my hotel, I imagined the moment his panic deepened, when the call he tried to make didn't go through, when he realized his phone, once funded by my company, was nothing more than an expensive paperweight. By the time his lawyer called Rachel in a panic, Blake couldn't even turn on the coffee machine in his house. At 9:42, Jessica Reeves posted an Instagram story. Brunch, champagne pouring into crystal flutes, the Rolex of her new companion gleaming in the frame. The caption, when the universe removes toxic people automatically. #blessed, #trading up, #new energy. Blake had been tagged. 5 minutes later, the tag vanished. She was already gone, moving on to her next mark. Marcus Chen called next, his tone clinical. He tried to buy coffee this morning, declined. 3 gas stations, declined. Apple Pay linked to the terminated corporate account, declined. He's at an ATM now, trying to pull from the joint account. Balance, 0. Every card, every account, every automatic payment that had propped up his lifestyle had collapsed overnight. The man who toasted his victory hours earlier was standing in quicksand, the ground vanishing beneath him. At 10:03, Thomas Garrett's name flashed across Rachel's phone. She put him on speaker. The panic was immediate, papers rustling, frantic typing. "Miss Thornton, I need clarification on some documentation," Garrett stammered. "The CBW Holdings Trust, my client believed the property was marital." Rachel's voice stayed cool, though her eyes glinted with satisfaction. "Your client signed documents acknowledging the property belonged to the trust." His signature appears on 7 separate pages. There was a pause, then Garrett backpedaled. Perhaps confusion about the implications. Confusion? Rachel cut him off. Your client signed a separation agreement demanding sole rights to property he knew was trust-owned. That's documentary fraud. We have his social posts, his rental listings, his signed acknowledgments. Would you like me to forward the evidence file? Silence. Papers shuffled. Garrett muttered off the line. Get Blake Wilson on the phone immediately. The click of a speakerphone. Then Blake's voice, raw with panic. Tom, what's happening? My car is gone. My cards don't work. I can't even make coffee in my own house. Garrett's reply was flat, merciless. It's not your house. It never was your house. What are you talking about? She signed the agreement. She gave me the house. But the victory he thought he'd secured with a cheap pen and a bad lawyer was already dissolving in his own hands. The moment Garrett turned on his own client, Blake's house of cards collapsed in real time. His composure shattered, Garrett's voice rising almost to a shout. Do you have any idea what you just let her do? You signed documents claiming ownership of property in a trust established before your marriage. You committed fraud, Blake, documentary fraud. She didn't give you anything. You gave her evidence to bury you with. The silence was suffocating. Blake's shallow, rapid breaths filled the line as reality finally cracked through his delusions. Rachel muted our end, and we listened as Garrett's voice turned frantic, spelling out the disaster. The property was never marital. Your social posts are evidence of intent. The separation agreement is worthless. You can't transfer what you never owned. And by demanding exclusive rights, you admitted in writing you understood the trust. Blake's reply was broken, barely audible. But you said possession was 9/10 of the law. You said if I established residency. I said that before I knew about the trust, before I saw your posts about turning it into rentals, before I knew you'd signed acknowledgments, Garrett snapped. His tone shifted from anger to desperation. You need to vacate immediately, today, before she files criminal charges. Rachel unmuted our line. Her voice was calm steel. We'll allow your client 72 hours to vacate, provided he doesn't damage or remove property. After that, we proceed with eviction and fraud charges. Blake's voice erupted faintly in the background, babbling about squatters' rights and residential tenancy laws. Garrett cut the call short, muttering about reviewing precedents. Rachel closed her laptop with quiet satisfaction. The eviction notice will be served tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Deputy Martinez has already been briefed. From my hotel window, the sunrise painted the city in amber when Jennifer Martinez texted me a video. Deputy Martinez, crisp in uniform, walking up my driveway with official papers that marked the beginning of Blake's removal. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Blake's number, this time from a landline, his cell service already dead. I answered on the third ring, my tone flat, professional. Cassidy, we need to talk about this, he began. The bravado was gone. This has gotten out of hand. Maybe we should sit down, discuss like adults. We did discuss it, I said evenly. You handed me papers demanding my house, my business, my inheritance. I signed exactly what you asked. That was just negotiation tactics, he stammered. You know how lawyers are, they start high. We could work this out. Try counseling. Remember how good things were in the beginning? The beginning, when he'd sold himself as an ambitious entrepreneur between ventures, when I'd mistaken confidence for competence, dreams for plans, promises for potential. The beginning hadn't been the truth. It had only been the audition. By the time Blake accused me of setting him up, his empire had already shrunk to a moving truck half empty with borrowed luxuries. Blake, the CBW Holdings Trust was established 2 years before we met, I said evenly. Every mortgage payment came from my business account. You signed acknowledgments yourself. There's nothing to work out. His tone snapped from conciliatory to venom in seconds. You set me up. This whole marriage was a business arrangement. The marriage was real, I told him. Your contribution wasn't. He shouted the rehearsed lines his bargain lawyer must have drilled into him. Claims about sacrifice, support, emotional labor. I countered with the facts. 4 years of bills he never paid, groceries he never bought, a mortgage he never touched. My voice stayed calm, clinical. You didn't sacrifice anything, Blake. You never had anything to sacrifice. The silence stretched until his voice returned, smaller now, cracking at the edges. Where am I supposed to go? My car's gone. I don't have money. You've destroyed my life, I reminded him. He had 72 hours. Daniel, his brother, pulled up at 2 p.m. with a U-Haul that looked far too big for the scraps Blake actually owned. From Mrs. Chin's cameras and Jennifer Martinez's texts, I watched the parade of defeat. The gaming chair he'd bragged about, funded by my quarterly dividend. Exercise equipment from his influencer phase, bought with my bonus. Vision boards from a life coach course I'd paid for, and he never finished. Neighbors lingered at mailboxes and sidewalks, sipping tea, walking dogs slower than usual, witnesses to his unraveling. Every item he tried to claim, Daniel shot down with receipts: the Peloton, the wine fridge, the TV. By 4 p.m., the truck held a pitiful collection: his clothes, self-help books, flimsy certificates from online courses, hollow monuments to ambition that never became action. Then Rachel called, her voice steady with numbers that sliced through the illusion. Over 4 years, Blake contributed 0 to household expenses. He spent $342,768 of your money on himself. $47,000 on gyms, $83,000 in restaurants, $31,000 on online courses, $45,000 on travel. The rest, shopping, entertainment, and cash withdrawals, lined up perfectly with the weekends he was with Jessica. I thought of the nights I dragged myself home after 14-hour days, only to find him sprawled on the couch, planning his next non-existent venture. $342,000, money that could have funded scholarships, shelters, startups. Instead, it bought his delusions, and now his empire was stacked in a truck smaller than my walk-in closet. The man who tried to steal my house was leaving with nothing but borrowed luxuries and broken dreams. At 5:47 p.m., Blake's empire disappeared around the corner in a U-Haul half full of delusions, leaving behind nothing but silence and the shell of a house finally ready to breathe again. I lingered in Mrs. Chen's driveway for one last look at the empty street, the stage where my marriage had been boxed and hauled away. Then I walked back with Robert, the locksmith, punctual at 6 o'clock sharp. He moved with quiet efficiency, replacing every lock, reprogramming every code, resetting the smart system Blake never bothered to learn. When the new deadbolt clicked shut, it sounded like a gavel. The sentence was over. The keys glinted under the porch light, heavy with finality. For the first time in days, I stepped into my house, not ours, mine. The air felt lighter, as if the walls had been holding their breath for 4 years and could finally exhale. Curtains were flung open, blinds raised, sunlight flooding rooms Blake had kept in shadow. My garden came into view, the one I'd planted but rarely enjoyed. The kitchen counters looked wider, without his protein powder towers, and energy drink cans marking territory they never earned. The next morning, Patricia and her ServiceMaster crew arrived, not to clean dirt, but to erase residue. Divorce cleanings have their own rituals: steam cleaning carpets where his drinks had stained, scrubbing bathrooms where his expensive skincare mocked the years he was losing, sterilizing every trace of him. Patricia nodded knowingly when I asked her to pay special attention to the master bedroom. She understood without words. Betrayal leaves its own toxins. While they worked, I drove to the storage unit where my real life had been exiled under his excuse of minimalist aesthetics. Box by box, I carried my history home. My father's books, my grandmother's china, the Victorian desk where she wrote her letters, dismissed by Blake as ruining the flow. Even Maya Angelou's collected works he'd mocked as depressing returned to their rightful shelf. For 3 days, I rebuilt the office he had papered in vision boards and empty affirmations. His dreams never launched, his goals never materialized, his quotes never motivated. I took them down, replaced them with reality. My awards, my contracts, my framed first dollar from Cassidy Blackwood Consulting. Proof that everything he tried to steal had been mine all along. Not borrowed, not imagined, but earned. By the time Blake's gym equipment rolled out of the garage, the space no longer smelled of sweat and failure. It echoed with possibility. Within a week, contractors had transformed it into the library I'd always wanted. Floor-to-ceiling shelves rose like monuments, holding the books he once mocked as pretentious. The first editions he'd tried to sell behind my back now stood proudly in the morning light, beside a reading chair that caught the sun like it was waiting for me all along. The air smelled of wood polish and old paper, not gym socks and protein powder. Sarah flew in from Seattle for the finishing touches, bringing champagne she'd been saving since our father's death. "You finally came to your senses," she said, filling my grandmother's crystal glasses, the ones Blake had tried to pawn off as useless relics. We toasted in my kitchen, the one he'd cluttered with supplements but never meals, and laughed as the truth about his downfall spread faster than any rumor he had ever crafted. Emma heard Patterson Industries whispering about my emergency contact update. Jennifer's husband confirmed Blake's country club ban, his favorite restaurant called Nervous About Unpaid Bills. And Jessica Reeves, the Instagram accessory he'd tried to upgrade me for, posted about spotting red flags and blocked him publicly for all their shared connections to see. Blake's empire of appearances dissolved overnight, his LinkedIn profile vanishing after his fresh start post was screenshot into oblivion. 6 months later, I hosted my first dinner party in a home that finally felt like mine. Rachel and her wife arrived with wine worth more than Blake's old gym dues. Emma brought lasagna in the dish Blake once banished. Mrs. Chin came with dumplings he'd sneered at as too ethnic. Candlelight danced across my grandmother's china, no longer props in Blake's failed performance, but plates serving their true purpose: connection, tradition, joy. Rachel raised her glass over dessert. To Cassidy, who proved the best revenge isn't destroying someone who wronged you, it's protecting what was always yours and letting them destroy themselves. The toast lingered in the air, filling the house with something Blake never could: truth. In the end, it wasn't the house or the company or even the legal win that mattered most. It was finally standing in a space that was mine in every way, and realizing I didn't need to fight to prove my worth. I had never needed Evan's approval, his love, his version of a future built on borrowed confidence. The revenge wasn't in what I took back. It was in what I refused to carry forward. Because sometimes the greatest justice is peace, earned, protected, and absolutely untouchable. If this story of calculated revenge had you hooked, hit that like button right now. My favorite moment? When Blake's own attorney screamed, "Do you have any idea what you just let her do?" the instant his empire imploded. What about you? Drop your favorite part in the comments below. And don't miss the next story, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's silent, steady, and inevitable.